A warm welcome for the members of the cast, the team from the Black Ball. I'd like to introduce the people who are up at the front here. On the far right, Carlos Gonzalez. Some applause for the actress Lola Dueñas, please. The actor Guitarricadelafuente, who is a musician and a composer inter alia. A huge applause for Penelope Cruz. The actor Miguel Bernardeau. And Milo Quifesthe, who is an actor as well. And finally, the Javis, Javier Calvo and Javier Ambrossi, the directors. Good morning. Hello. Very pleased to be here. It's my privilege to ask the first question. I'd like to ask you how you viewed Federico García Lorca. How did you turn this into such an ambitious film? We have not just the history, the story of Lorca, but the history of Spain, what it means to be homosexual, and the connection with your own lives. Well, it was fate. Javier and I went to Ibiza to write the last chapter of Las Mesias because we couldn't write in Madrid, and we needed a bit of fresh air. In the plane, which took off very quickly, we watched La Piedra Oscura, which was the seed for this film. So we watched that, and that was the triggering point. I went up in the plane. We took off. I read the prologue, having bought the book, in fact. And I started to cry in a totally irrational way, as though something had happened within myself. I didn't know exactly what it was, nor what was happening with that book, but it really spoke to me. And Javier saw me crying, and he said, "Well, what's up? What's happened?" I said, "Look at this book." We were in we had an award for a play in the theater in Spain, and I read this book, and we started to write the script. In La Piedra Oscura, they talk about this blackballing of Lorca, so we bought some books about Lorca, and we saw this dramatis personae who seemed magical, the black ball. Well, Federico, it's called The Drama of Current Customs. It was a very realistic piece of work which spoke to everyone. But when you actually look at the characters, there are only 4 pages, the dramatis personae, and 2 pages for that, and 2 pages of text. And all of a sudden, it's also very realistic in what Lorca wrote. And you have these scenes where there's snow. These characters who seemed very poetic. It wasn't poetry, but we felt that it was really worthwhile what we found in that book. And we thought, well, we could draw on that, draw our inspiration. And it really spoke to us. And that's when we thought about Alberto's story. It was fate. And one thing happened after another. Creation is a very mysterious thing. He's given a very apt explanation of the situation. Well, that's exactly what happened. That's how things fell into place. I think we have a first question in the room. Hello. Good morning. Maria Guerra. Congratulations on this film, which is monumental. And moreover, I think it does bring about a miracle. New generations can see the Civil War in a different way after 90 years after shooting Lorca. In Spain, you often hear, well, yet another film about the Civil War. So I'd like to ask you, how did you decide to direct this film towards the young generation? Sometimes you feel there may be a nostalgia of dictatorships. And how do you think the Civil War affected us personally, or affected you personally? I believe that, of course, a lot of people are totally ignorant about what happened. And when you're more familiar with what actually occurred at the time, you can see how radical some people were, and you learn a great deal. The people who were with us, who have been assisting us and helping us ever since we worked in the theater and started with our minor plays, well, they all helped us to discover Lorca and what a great person he is. I was very pleased when the film was screened because I wanted to get to know Lorca much better for about 15 or 20 years. And I freed myself in the manner in this film. I wanted to write about the life of Lorca, the ally, bring together both poetry and the theater. And that was a huge challenge in the film. I wanted to address the young generation and present them with this portrait of Lorca. As to the Civil War, well, the character of Penelope, for example, cross-dressing is full of fantasy, and it's the opposite of war. So I think what we wanted to show, the idea we wanted to portray in this manner, was that when there's a lack of communication, that gives rise to violence. That's what the film talks about. And we have to find a way to talk together. Alberto's character and his mother, for example, which can't agree even on family matters, very basic things. They can't build anything in their lives because they become violent as soon as they're together. They accuse each other who was guilty, and that's the way families operate. That's the way they function. So the viewpoint we wanted to show in terms of the war is that if we can't reach an agreement, that ends up spawning violence. Dialogue is the only way out, the only solution for all. And I hope that this will open up possibilities for empathy. One should be able to view other people as just other human beings. When Raphael, for example, is in bed and the nurse says, "Oh, are you afraid of blood?" And then he suddenly says, "Oh, she says he's very kind, he's very nice." And you can see him breathing again. So for me, it's very important to show in the film that other people really exist. Another question here. Fines and Hellas, Mexican radio and Colombian radio. I would like to ask a question to the actors. You portray the Civil War of Spain. We know that in the case of Federico García Lorca, he adopted a political stance, and that was what was best known, and not his homosexuality. In terms of this character, you view him as a whole. You tell his story, and then we have Penelope. For you, was this film very important? Because you leapt into the project towards the end in this Black Ball film? I believe that there's something very important in terms of Federico García Lorca. Nobody ever talked about his sex life, his emotional life, because it had nothing to do with his art. People didn't really look at the person as a whole. But everything he wrote, in fact, talked about his pain, the pain he experienced. He suffered from this pain. Gerba is someone who can't have children. He thinks he'll never have children. So all Lorca's work talks about this. And not talking about it, negating it, all these feelings, they can't be studied in an aseptic way, and that had turned into a sort of an obsession. I wanted to portray Lorca as a whole in terms of his emotions, his political stances, his actual being. And I think that it's very striking, for example, when the Sonetos de Amor Oscuro were published, these are sonnets that talk about gay love. It's very, very poetic. That's what you hear at the end of the film. The word dark, oscuro, was eliminated because we didn't want to talk about things that were dark. On the contrary, we wanted to shed light on all these aspects. Furthermore, the LGBT group needs references, and if you hide that part of things, if you hide the sexuality of Lorca, then you're doing away with a real reference. When I was studying Lorca, nobody explained to me at the time, when I was a child, anything about his sex life. People say, well, maybe he was gay, but he never really did anything in that respect. It's not true. It's actually quite disgusting. And it's not a question of displaying this in a blatant manner. It's just a question of portraying the character as he is. Now, why am I? Why do I appear in the film? I love the Javis. I've loved them since their very first films. We had met during a given event, and we thought we should talk together again. So they said to me, well, we're going to prepare a meeting, a meal where we can talk in greater depth about these matters. And we then saw the documentary. Yes, we talked together, but we couldn't broach all the discussions and topics we wanted to. So what we did was to say to ourselves that we'd really like to work together at some point in time. And they said, well, we've got something here, and we thought about you, but it's hard for us to send you the script because it's a tiny little role. It's a tiny little part. It lasts maybe 10 minutes. And I said, well, send it to me anyway. I'd be very happy. I don't base my decision on the number of minutes my character is in the script. I want to be part of things that are important for me, speak to me. When I read the script, I discovered this fantastic story. I felt it would be wonderful to be part of something that's even more important than just one more film. We're not crazy. We feel that films can't change the world, granted, but in some cases they can help to improve things, reactivate important debates, reach out to people's hearts by, in particular, the younger generations, as Maria was saying. We think it's very important, and this is one of my powerful motivations when I'm in a film. And the Javis have tremendous talent, and be part of this kind of a film. Well, it didn't matter to me whether I was 3 minutes or in the film or for the whole film. I felt in my heart that this was very important to be part of. Important not only in our country, but elsewhere as well. I felt this film was quite monumental, and for many people, well, for children who were not quite an adult, who were even only 20 or so, when I was that age, what I read in books, what I grasped can be very powerful. And likewise, in a movie theater, if you're sitting there for 2.5 hours, what you see can have much greater impact than what you study for even 3 years at school. So for me, I was deeply motivated to play this part. I felt deeply moved because I think it represents a form of freedom. When I start to cry in the film, well, I always start to cry at the same moment in time. It's when Alvaro sees what René has done, and for him, they're at the beach, and you have this dance. People are full of fear. He doesn't want anyone to see him. And with the lighting, you can see it's a dreamlike world. he's saying, well, I myself might be free. I could express myself the way I am, not playing a part and being hated or assassinated for what I am. And that moment deeply moves me. And it springs from his innermost self and the other characters. For me, therefore, it was very important. It's a sort of a guide. And this person, for me, represents what freedom might be. Romero is based on a Spanish a singer who was a transvestite in the 60s in Madrid. In fact, these were women who talked about and sung about sex and about freedom. They were there was cross-dressing. There were lots of gays who wrote some mad novels, and it was a whole generation living in Madrid who were constantly partying and were totally free. And they thought that this freedom would last, but then 2 dictatorships ensued, and many of them were assassinated. So I think it's very meaningful to remind everything about the situation in the past. There were times of freedom, but which were brought to an end. Question for Javier. Why hide this part of things? Why not depict the real person in this overall background? Also, this sensitivity is very deep. I think it's incomparable, and no other person could have conveyed this same thing. You talked about important decisions. We constantly make decisions throughout our life, and in the film you have these black balls and these white balls which depict it. What exactly is the question? Decisions. That's very important in the film. The decisions taken at each time. That is, you cast a black ball or a white ball. This film depicts sometimes that it's impossible to take decisions on the part of the characters, for example, Sebastian and the others. It's simply impossible to make a decision. Carlos says, are you homosexual? And he answers, no, that's a decision. Is it? He says, no, it's not a decision, it's an obligation given the system. He's in the casino surrounded by all these men, and they say, are you homosexual? And he says, no. Is he deciding? No. He's saying that. Then he decides, does he decide to assassinate Rafael? No, he's not incapable. He's not capable of shooting him, but he has no choice. So we've made this film about the inability to decide, the inability to communicate. Because will they be happy if they take decisions? Will they be happy because they are free? Will they be happy for this and that? We felt it was very important to create a very great film which focuses on 3 gay protagonists with 3 gay actors and gay directors and a very diverse cast and a very great cast. I don't want to think that LGBT plus films are just niche films. I think this kind of film can speak to everyone. It's everyone's rights we're talking about. So you have this inability to express oneself, inability to take decisions. We created a very expressive film around this focal point that encompasses just about everything. But deep down, they can't make decisions. You have this contrast between their intimacy and life that surrounds me. It's a huge film on these tiny little things. That is what you have in yourself. Who are you? There's a sentence whereby which says, deny me, and you see what happens. And that's what happens when you deny your innermost truth. I think we can thank all the actors here. Thank you to each and every one of you. Could you explain how you felt when portraying your characters? We've talked about freedom. We've talked about the impossibility to communicate. How did you sense your characters who were living in darkness, but then thanks to this film, they come to see the light? Well, just imagine It was wonderful to be directed by these two fantastic people who have such a great, generous heart. Well, Alberto, it's a film that talks about what you inherit, not in tangible terms, not documents or papers. It talks about what you inherit, what you carry around with you that is so very personal. And if you carry all this around inside you, but at a given point in time, you have to really take a hard look at what you've inherited. In my case, in terms of this character, I'm a very social person, a very active person, yet my character is very solitary. The Javis had warned me. They said no one would talk to me during the shooting of the film. That would enable me to really concentrate on my character. So the Javis, I agree with what they said. This film deals with very intimate matters, very private matters. Sebastian, for example, in a sense, we have the issue of memory and historical memory, not just historical memory in terms of being heterosexual or being mainstream. Homosexuals also are part of history. So it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to be in this film, to work with these wonderful actresses, who some of whom I've known since I was small. It was a dream to be here. I dreamt of working directly with all these actresses. I grew up on them. I was deeply impacted by images, it's important to see the actors and actresses in person, to see how they breathe, how they lend life to their characters. I was very pleased to work with the other actors and with the directors. It was a very, very happy time. Well, for me, it was my first experience as an actor. It was the first time I'd been in front of a camera, and doing it in this manner together with you two was quite a wonderful experience. As to the character of Sebastian, I sort of sensed him. I felt for him. There was something of him in me. I was Sebastian myself in part. And I suffered with his desires, what was imposed on him. He talks about things. He sees people dying, his family, his mother. Everyone is killed. And I felt for him. I felt his solitude. You had this background of war and ferocious fighting. Yet he has this little flame of love, this little flicker between Sebastian and Raphael, and it's a sort of a last hope that they latch onto. And for me, this was a very beautiful scene, particularly when Penelope appears on the set and she says, "Oh, well, we'll see each other again in Madrid. I'm waiting for you there." I don't know. It was a spectacular experience. They are perhaps the best directors in the world. I wish all actors and actresses could have the same experience and work with the directors like we did. The character really existed. He came from a family that had links with Federico. And it was wonderful working with you. It was like plunging into a pool, dropping off a cliff. It was an amazing experience. Thank you very much for everything. For me, I'll never forget this experience of the Black Ball. It was a whole team that worked together in a manner which moved me deeply. There was something in the shooting of this film which was very special, quite unique. The Javis are very special. It's very special working with them. It's very special acting with them. And spending a bit of time with them was a very special moment for me. So it was an honor, and I will continue to view it in this manner. So thank you very much. Good morning. Well, like Alvaro, it's the first time I've acted in a movie. I felt I was extremely fortunate. I was truly lucky to be able to begin with these outstanding directors. Thanks to them, I was able to get to know my character, Carlos. Working with them, well, they know exactly who they're choosing for their characters. They choose just the right actors. The match is excellent. So when I tried to understand Carlos, I in fact drew on my innermost feelings. He's a character. He has amazing answers about life. So I felt that I was working with a family. This idea of taking or not taking decisions, saying or not saying. I discovered Carlos as a character, and sometimes I discovered more about myself portraying this character. It was quite an amazing experience. It was a wonderful time, and I feel I'm very lucky to have received such support. I really love everyone very much. We have a question here. Hello, Margarita, Catalonia Radio. I'd like to ask the Javis how you have experienced the last few hours, this screening in Cannes, going up the red carpet, this long ovation. You may get an award. Also, Penelope, you're an expert in Cannes. What's it like being here this time? Is there something different with this film? Well, obviously there are the social networks that have been hard at work, and I have viewed everything as a sort of a dream. And yesterday, when the film was screened, we saw that the film was really speaking to people, conveying what we wanted to say. And we thought, this is fantastic. Everyone's understood. Yes, absolutely. No, for me, it's a dream. For many years, I'd had this dream. We've been coming to the festival for many years with Javi to watch films, to learn, to improve, to feel that we are part of this incredible movement. So we came, we watched the films, and then we used to go back home. And suddenly, to belong to all this, to be working alongside so many stars, to see the screening, it was a magical moment. What I like most is that what led us here was actually the film. In Spain, we're fairly well known. Sometimes you're very popular, and this popularity may help you in certain situations. But here, it's the film. It's the film that enabled us to be here. Nobody knew about us. Nobody knew who we were, and nobody knew anything about the film. And so it was a marvelous moment. We wanted to have this experience. We wanted to see what it would be like when the film was screened, what would happen, what the reaction would be. And I came here thinking we are plunging into the unknown. In fact, when I saw the photographers, and we went up this lengthy red carpet. I had to take a deep breath. I had to say, we're actually here. The first year we came to the festival, I remember 15 minutes before the screening, my goodness, I don't know whether I forgot my suit, and we had to go around all the shops to find some proper clothes to wear. And the years have gone by. And it's really a dream that has come true. These press conferences, all these extraordinary experiences, well, it's something I had dreamt about. Being here is such an incredible gift. For me, I had to take a deep breath, look at everyone, and really say to myself, yes, I'm actually here. Because you can imagine it, but you don't really experience it. It's hard to believe. And we're very grateful, extremely grateful. Well, the truth of the matter is that I have very happy memories of the first time I was here. I think I was about 25 years old. And some of the most powerful memories was when Volver came out. Volver, when it was screened, it was totally magical. Right, Lola? It was incredible. I have a lot of memories that span different years, thanks to various films. Sometimes things went really well, sometimes less well, but you always learn something here. And you always go back home. Well, I love the work Thierry does. He does things beautifully, and I have great respect for him. He is passionately keen on the cinema. He's a person who makes such efforts and does things so well. I always have great pleasure seeing him here, despite the many years that I've come. And yesterday evening was one of the strongest, most powerful moments I've ever experienced at the festival. The strongest, and I was deeply moved. Also by them, because they're so young. Of course, I was used to being the youngest, but now I have to realize that the Javis are much younger than I am. And one part of my mind was saying, oh, right at the beginning, you were always told you're the child, you're the kid, and suddenly you think, no, I'm not the kid anymore. I'm the oldest up here at the rostrum. And then this touched me in terms of my maternal instincts. I felt that I could protect them. I could see Cannes through the eyes who's coming for the of someone who's coming to Cannes for the very first time to see his or her film screened. I had been in that situation, but at the same time, what makes me very happy is that I have this experience. I had the same emotion last night, as though it was the first time I was here 25 years ago, because we so much love what we do. We feel so very fortunate to be able to live off this profession, to be in this marvelous industry. Of course, some things are good, some things are less good. That each time is like it was the first time. And, for example, I'm never sure that I'll come back. I never say to myself, no, I'll definitely be there. It's always a surprise. This competition, for me, always holds out surprises. But I come always with the same enthusiasm, and I look at it with the eyes of a child, even if I'm not a child anymore up here at the rostrum. Another question? I come from Brazil. How did you prepare for interpreting your character? What about the political stance of this showgirl who you portray? Well, I prepared myself. Well, the musical bits I prepared very carefully. And I thought that I love dancing. I've danced for years and years, and as soon as I have an opportunity, I train again. And I was very happy to portray this character. She's a wonderful woman, and I love all the dancers in the film. The directors were very present throughout the shooting of the film. Each step was like a choreography. So you had the DOP, and they also spoke constantly with the choreographer as to how they wanted this or that person to be positioned in the film, how they should come in, leave. Everything was choreographed in detail. So that was great, insofar as I was concerned. And then we recorded the songs, and I had a singing teacher. I love dancing. I love to sing. We worked together for quite some time to rehearse and to train. And when I saw the film yesterday, there's an anecdote. I wondered whether it would be shared, should be shared or not. But all sorts of things happen when you're shooting a film, things you could never imagine. It opens up new paths and windows. And they said, well, the evening, the night shots, we're not going to have you appear with these soldiers. You will know the choreography, but you don't know who you'll be with. And I thought, this is great. I love surprises in life. And then when we were about to go out, I was putting on my wig, and they said, oh, apparently you have some brain aneurysm. And that was just supposed to be a joke. I don't know whether it was true or not, but then she cries, she puts on her wig, and they said, well, don't say anything until the next day. I'll ask the doctor. You can sing and dance tomorrow, and then you can continue the shooting. For me, this was an amazing moment in the film. I thought I was about to die. This is something that was totally surreal in my life. I thought to myself, oh, there's an aneurysm. Is this a false alarm, or is it real? Look at all the life on the set. They worked for 5 hours before actually shooting this little scene, and I said, it's a total miracle. I must have this in me. And then the next day, I looked at their reaction. Nothing was going to happen. The shooting was not going to stop. And for me, talking about all these things is very important. It's important to share information about where such characters take you. You experience these things together, yet despite all this, despite the hardship, you can move forward in life. And I think they're the only people who knew all these details. They provided such a